And then he said, Hammond did, that the country needed to get back to living within our means and reduce our borrowing. Hammond said, we need to get back to living within our means and reduce our borrowing. Right. Come back to that in a second. Tens of thousands of people marched in London yesterday to protest against more austerity and more cuts to the health service and more cuts to benefits, much needed benefits by people who can't work. And these people are campaigning and asking for more money to be spent on the National Health Service and more money to be spent on social care. But Hammond is saying looking to borrow more money is confused and reckless. And the Sunday Times says, now listen carefully to this, that public sector net debt in the UK, not including public sector banks, debt is at £1.68 trillion at the end of January this year, equivalent to 85.5% of gross domestic product. That statistic comes from national statistics. We are in debt, we have to live within our means and reduce our borrowing, says the Chancellor Philip Hammond. Now I know I've banged on about this a few times in recent programmes, but I'm going to bang on about it again. We're very lucky on this programme, and there's no arrogance, there's no ego here. We're very lucky that we reach a more mainstream audience. We reach people who ordinarily wouldn't listen to programmes like ours. That's why I bang on about this issue. Debt to who or whom? Who is the money owed to? Live within our means. What does that mean? Does that mean the state must live within its means? Is anybody asking the question, why is the state borrowing money from anybody to begin with? And I've said before, this is the massive lie that binds the conspiracy together. So if you see the conspiracy as a box, the banking system is the twine, the cable that binds the box together. It really is. It's real gatekeeper stuff, this. Entry-level stuff for you. I know that. I know you're way beyond that. But most people are not. Who is owed the money? Who is owed the £1.7 trillion? I've tried in vain to get a journalist to ask it. Kay Burley at Sky, Nicky Campbell. Both of them tweet me back on occasion when I've poked them gently about their programmes and about the issues on their programmes. All good banter, nothing malicious. I've never insulted any of these people. I've never been rude to them, overly rude anyway. I've never been, just downright nasty with them. They banter back, no harm in that. Kay Burley asked me where did I put my Pulitzer Prize. So I don't have one, of course. I'm not as good as Kay. So all this banter goes on sometimes in the afternoons. You can follow it on Twitter. As soon as I ask these people to put a question to the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney about the creation of money, they go very quiet. No response to that. No retweeting of that. No caustic remark to that. Why? Because it's the gatekeeper for the conspiracy. Does Kay Burley on Sky, Nicky Campbell on the BBC, do they know this? I don't think so. I think they're bright enough people, but I don't think they understand this. I don't think they get it. I want you to have a listen to this. I dug this out earlier on. Here is a senior economist at the Bank of England. Now listen, this is vital stuff, this again. If you're brand new to this information and you're listening to this programme and you've only just recently started to tune into it, God help you. But if you are recent, if you are new to it, listen to who this is. Senior Bank of England economist Ryland Thomas admitting basically the massive... He's not admitting the massive conspiracy. He's admitting He's acknowledging how money comes into existence. And it's vital that you hear this. This is Ryland Thomas, Senior Economist, Bank of England. Listen carefully.
Ryland, your article is about how money gets created. We're surrounded here by gold in the vaults of the Bank of England, and historically in the gold standards, the amount of gold would have been related to the stock of money in the economy. Things are very different now. In the modern economy, where does money come from?
Well, broad money, which in many ways is a better measure of the amount of money circulating in the economy, includes all the bank deposits of households and companies. And one of the key points of the article is that banks create additional broad money whenever they make a loan. Banks create additional broad money whenever they make a loan. Banks create additional broad money whenever they make a loan. Banks create additional broad money whenever they make a loan. Now, while this is nothing new, it is sometimes overlooked as the main way in which money is created. Overlooked as the main way in which money is created. Overlooked as the main way in which money is created. And it runs contrary to the view sometimes put forward that banks can only lend out deposits that they already have. In fact, loans create deposits, not the other way around.
There you go. It's the main way in which money is created. Broad money loaned into existence by banks from the horse's mouth. A senior economist at the Bank of England telling it as it is. And those criminal institutions, and they are criminal by the way, who created money out of thin air, loaned it to you. Listen to this again. I know there are those of you who've listened to the programme a long time, you're way beyond this, but you can share this with people who can't get it or can't understand it. This is the way it works. These criminal institutions created money out of thin air, loaned it to you at no cost to them whatsoever, because they invented that out of thin air like that. There you are. Then they charged you interest on it. You couldn't pay, so they took your house. What does that mean? Well, it means they started off with nothing. Nothing. They credited you with money electronically, numbers on a screen. You couldn't pay them back. They now have something, and you have nothing. Right? It doesn't get any more simple. Yet it is the reality that dare not speak its name on national media. They will not talk about it. A criminal institution lied to you by telling you they were loaning you money. They weren't. They didn't have that money. You went out and got a house. They asked you for 8%, 9%, 11%, 12%, whatever it is. On top of that, you couldn't make those payments. Your wages are not going up. The cost of living is. The interest prices maybe fluctuate. You're struggling, you can't make it. They take back your house. It was a fraudulent transaction from the word go. They now have something. You've got nothing. And allowed to do that, they got greedy, allowed to create money out of thin air, derivative trading, junk bonds, the subprime mortgage crisis, phantom housing bubbles created by banks using money they invented out of thin air. But worse again, the criminal bastards used your savings and they used your pensions. Criminals. We were told these institutions were broke, weren't we? Do you remember? 2008, 2009, they're broke. What happened? Were they dismantled? Were they allowed to fail? Were they? Because any other business, in any other walk of life, you screw up, you're out of business. It's the way the cookie crumbles. That's the jungle. Were these banks broken up, dismantled, allowed to fail? No, they weren't. They were bailed out using taxpayers' money. Your money. This is so ludicrous. I've said this before. I've been saying it for 10 years. This is so fucking lunatic in its reality. It's hard sometimes for me to accept that people can't see this. Bailed out using your money. They fucked you over. Lulled you into a transaction based on a pack of lies. Humiliated you and took your house. Went off and invented casino banking. I mentioned all the terms already. Derivative trading, subprime mortgages, junk bonds, packaging up bad mortgages, selling them, buying them, good after bad. Went broke. And then they were bailed out using your money. They weren't punished. They weren't forced to change their practices. They weren't allowed to go bankrupt. Why? Because it's part of a plan to impoverish people and to detach you and me from owning property and land. I don't own a property. I am 42 years old. I have worked all my life. I couldn't even imagine being able to afford to put a down payment on a house and get a mortgage. Could you? I guarantee you, without having any sort of, I've not done any survey, but I'm guessing that the majority of people in Manchester my age, 42, I bet you more than half of them don't own their own house. And we are paying ludicrous, over the odds rent prices. £800, £900, £1,000 a month rent for 3-bedroom houses. And we can't get a mortgage because we're not supposed to. Listen to Keith Pilbeam. Who the hell is he, you ask? Keith is a professor at the Department of Economics and Finance at City University. Good guy, Keith. We must look him up and see can we get him on the programme. He told RT yesterday, Professor Keith Pilbeam, he told RT yesterday that bailing out the banks screwed the people even more.
Obviously, if you decide to bail out failed banks, then obviously a lot of money's got put into that rather than into education, infrastructure and other things that could have improved the economy. So this is, in economics, we call it opportunity cost. And so this decision to bail out the banks, to some extent, meant that other money couldn't be used for other government projects and investment in the economy. It's very worrying because this government claims that it's worried about poverty and child poverty and issues like that. But the facts are that the tax and benefit changes are actually responsible for this increase in poverty. And also, of course, protecting pensioners. Poverty for pensioners is going to decline, whilst for children it's going up. Now, that's to do with policy. It's nothing to do with the economy. I mean, it's to do with tax and benefit changes.
It is about policy. That was Professor Keith Pilbeam from City University, Department of Economics and Finance. Their policy is to create what David coined the phrase the Hunger Games society. Because if the government had let the banks fail, what would have happened? See, nobody's ever asked this question. It's never been discussed on national media. What would have happened if the banks had failed? Well, the banks would have been nationalised, right? The banks would have been taken into public ownership. That could never be allowed to happen. Public ownership of major financial institutions could never be allowed to happen. Because if that was to happen, and countries were to supply their own currency, their own sovereign currency, interest-free, print their own money, as they should be doing, it's pretty much game over for the cabal. And this is why I use the analogy of this is the entry level. This is the gatekeeper to the conspiracy. The twine that binds the conspiracy in the box is the financial system. Who was advocating in 2008, 2009 to allow the banks to fail so that they could be taken into public ownership? Who was advocating for that? Nobody. Nobody was asking the question, well, if we're using billions of pounds of taxpayers' money, why don't we just own those banks? Who was asking those questions at the time? Well, we were. I was doing a radio show in Spain. We were screaming it from the rooftops, getting economists to talk about it. Nobody else was. Can never be allowed to happen, that.